Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Please be seated. Keys. Simple keys. We have them every day with us, don't we? They're in our pocket, they're in our hands. They're pieces of metal, sometimes they're even electronic now. But one way or the other, you always have keys with you, and we have had them for centuries. And they have been so important to us. We use them so much that we don't even notice that we're using keys, unless you're like me and your hands are full, and there's the lock in front of you. Or, even worse, you don't think these are important? Lose them and find out just how important they are. They will. They are important, and you will know it. I know from a fact I remember years ago, I love to be on time to every meeting, and I had a court case that I was working on. This was back in Virginia, and I had to be at Fairfax Courthouse. And I remember getting dressed, and if you know anything about me, you'll know that my wallet, my watch, my keys, my cell phone, everything is in order for that next morning for me to go and get out of the house. And sure enough, I got ready, and that's back when I actually wore a tie, not a collar. And I was ready to go to court. And I grabbed my wallet, my watch, put it on, my rings, I put them on, and cell phone, and then guess what? My keys were missing. I started to panic. I didn't know what to do. I had to be at court. I started searching the house. You go, and the first thing what do? You look for the pants you were wearing the day before, and you're beating them out. I love when you check them 2 or 3 times, because suddenly they're going to appear, but they're not there. And I remember panicking so much that I eventually called my neighbor, who I was at their house that night. And I remember calling and going, listen, did I leave my keys at your house? I can't find them. Can you check your sofa? Can you? And they go, who is this? And I'm sorry, it's Keith, and I've lost my keys, and I've got to go. And so anyway, they said, well, look, we'll call you if we find them. They probably went right back to bed, and I don't blame them. But I continued to search the house, and a couple of hours later, I found them. And they were in the child's toy box. Can't blame her. When we go to Toys R Us and we buy the plastic keys, how are they supposed to know any difference? But it is a day that I learned just how important keys are, because without them, the start of our day is ruined. It is something. Keys are very important in our life, whether in practice or in symbolic. Both of them are something to us. My mom, to this day, has on her wall a set of keys that belonged to my great-grandmother. They were skeleton keys, remember them? And they would sit up there. And she has them up there, and they're much more than a piece of metal or keys that don't go to a lock anymore. But for my mom, it's about memories. It's about looking at them and remembering the time that she was with her grandma, and she would spend the night with her, and the times they cooked together, the stories that her grandmother told her. In other words, it's way beyond who my great-grandmother was. As a matter of fact, it's so big that my mom would continue telling me the stories. And I told my children the stories when looking at the keys. So they can be symbolic. There's a lot of symbolism of keys in our life. There's the key to the city, right? You do something really nice for a city, what do? They give you a key to the city. How about the key to my heart? Talking about love. How about the big key on The Price is Right? Remember, if you're trying to win the big car, you got the big key. And so again, it is. Or how about when a rector of a church, when he is brought in, is given the big key, is symbolism. There's also a lot of practical reasons that also can symbolize things in our life. Like, for instance, a new job. When they say, here you go, here are the keys to the office. You're there. Or keys to the company car. Or when I love the ones that are like this, you know. And here's one to the supply closet, because people keep stealing paper. So here's like you're somebody special because you get to have one. Keys can mean a lot. And how about the trust between two neighbors? When a neighbor finally comes over and says, here's a key to my house, can you hold on to it? It means a lot. But out of all the keys in our lives, You remember the two big keys that meant the most to you? Keys to your first car and keys to your first house. Oh, that was big, wasn't it? It was so big because they remind us of something more than just mental. It meant independence, it meant maturity, as well as opportunity and responsibility. That's what it really represents. I can remember in high school, my parents, when I was so cool in high school, I had to go work at Chick-fil-A at the mall. And every week I would drive to the mall, and my parents would be in the passenger seat, making sure long after I got my driver's license that I could do the job. Finally, I remember one night I'm all dressed up, looking cool, let me tell you. I was terrible back then. That's a whole other story. But my dad handed me over the keys to his car and said, "Here you go. I want you to be careful." It meant the world to me. It meant that I achieved something. It meant that I achieved his trust. And I knew what those keys meant, and I was shocked the night he did it. And he handed them to me, and I remember holding on to them because what I knew was a lot of responsibility has been given to me. This was new opportunity for me to go see friends, as well as responsibility. I knew when I got in that car that night, I had to be careful. I knew that I had to watch out for my safety and the safety of those around me. And I certainly knew I needed to protect his car because I was not coming home with a dent. I remember when Karen and I received the set of keys to our first house. It meant a lot to us. I can remember being so excited and yet sick on my stomach. And I remember looking at her going, "What have we done?" And she said, "I don't know, but we've done it." And I remember it was great because it showed achievement. But also it showed us great opportunity, but also great responsibility. I knew that the opportunities of my friends coming over and having a great time would increase, and we would have a wonderful time at this house. But I also knew we had a mortgage to pay for, unlike my friends. I knew I had bills to pay for. I knew if something happened to the house, you have to repair it. In other words, great responsibility. That's what keys are about. Something we hold every day that we don't even notice. But keys mean opportunity and responsibility. And that's what we're seeing today in the gospel. In the gospel today, Jesus is with his disciples, and there's a lot going on. Matter of fact, there are several sermons that you can make on this little bit of information. But what I want to look at is the keys that he gives. And we will talk about that now. What I want to talk about is Jesus is in Caesarea Philippi. This is in the northern region of the country. I've talked about this before in my class as well as here. But the best way to put it is kind of like the red light district of the area. There's a lot of influence, Roman influence and Greek influence here, and a lot's going on. It's also an area which has lots of temples to lots of false gods. Lots of gods. There would be fertility gods, air god, rain gods, sun god, moon god, weather god. I mean, you name it, there's a god for it. And people would be coming to these temples and they would be giving of themselves or giving grains or sacrifices to all these different gods. There were some acts that were happening that I would never tell you here in church. I probably wouldn't even tell you at a bar. I mean, there was some pretty harsh things going on at some of these temples. And so you can imagine now through the sight of the disciples going, why is the rabbi bringing us here of all places? Because for a Jewish man, this would have been horrifying, number one, because people are worshiping somebody besides God. It would have been horrifying. And then to see what is going on. But Jesus does. He takes them down, and I want you to kind of think as they're walking down like the pillars you see here on the sides, the different gods that you would see as they're walking. And imagine them if they would even look up at it to see some of the statues of these gods and people worshiping them. Again, you know, if you wanted more rain, you see people over there at the rain god, talking to the rain god to give us more rain. Or if we need more sun, it's been too cloudy, to go to them. On and on. Finally, Jesus stops at a temple of all places. There he's on this rock outcropping. He has them sit down. And I want you to kind of picture this large rock outcropping, and in that rock outcropping is a great big cave. And that cave water comes out of. And there would have been statues carved. And those statues would have been of the god Pan. Remember Pan, the little half goat, half human, with his little harp, with his little horns and his little goatee and his little hooves? He is a fertility god. And what Pan did, and the reason people would be worshiping, is Pan apparently lives in Hades. He lives in hell, down below the earth. And every spring, he would come up with the water out into the air, out into the world. And then, when he comes out, suddenly everything starts to turn green. All of a sudden, your plants start to bud. In other words, springtime. And that's who brings it, is Pan. And so there, you would see these statues sitting there, and it was known in the early church and in Jesus' time as the gates of hell, the gates of Hades. That was the name of it. And so that's where Jesus decides to bring his disciples. On a side note, you will see how the early church knew about this in the paintings they did of Satan, where Satan all of a sudden starts to have horns and the goatee and the hooves. You're seeing it influenced by the gates of hell. You're seeing it influenced by Pan. And so, anyway, Jesus is there, and he begins to teach his disciples. And he tells them, here I'm going to build my church. What place to do that? But that's what he decides to do. And he picks up Peter. And there he says, on this rock I will begin to build my church. Jesus is known as the cornerstone. I think that Peter is the first block. And there he says, your name is now Petro, or Peter, stone. And here on this rock I will begin my ministry. I will begin my church. When people say they don't need church, I'm like, why? Jesus is the one who talked about it first. He wanted to build it there. And he says, and the gates of where? The gates of hell or Hades will not overcome it. That was his point. He wanted to show the famous gates of hell, and that the gates of hell will never overcome his church. Even though sometimes we may feel like it will. It will not. He then looks at Peter, and he says, and I give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Can you imagine being Peter? Think about that just for a moment. Like my father handing those keys to me that night. Imagine telling Peter, I am handing over two things, opportunity and responsibility. I am giving you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. In other words, I'm handing you the opportunity to teach people about the kingdom of God. And now that I've handed the keys to you, it's your responsibility. Imagine the excitement and the fear that he must have had at the same time. To be Petro, the stone, the rock, the new foundation of the church. My question for you today is, what about us? What about you? What keys has God placed in your hand? After all, he has. What keys are in your hands that God has given you that opportunity and responsibility? Are the keys we're so used to what God has given us that we don't even know they're in our hands anymore? We don't realize they're even in our pocket? Do we walk around and maybe use it here and there and don't even realize what we're doing, like a normal set of keys? What has God done? What has he placed in your hands? Has he placed the key of ministry? Has he put in the key of responsibility or opportunity? What has God given you as a follower and as a church? I remember years ago, and some of you were even here, I was given the big key as the 5th rector of Holy Trinity by the Lake. I will never forget that night. The place was packed, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful time. And I received lots of different gifts, stole, Bible, etc. But one was the key. And I remember when they came to present me with the key, I knew what this really meant. Opportunity and responsibility. I remember looking at it and with great excitement, and matter of fact, I still just holding it gives me great excitement. And when I was in Greenville just a couple weeks ago, I was talking about you guys, by the way. I can't help it because, frankly, I am still excited about being the rector at Holy Trinity. I love you guys, and I love this church. But when I saw this key, what I saw was ministry. What I saw was God's people. What I saw was the hungry in our community. What I saw was the poor in our community. What I saw were people seeking God. What I saw were children seeking Christ. What I saw was adults seeking something bigger than themselves. And what I saw were people who are hungry and thirsty for the knowledge of God. And so should you. You see, this key was not just given to me. It was given to you also. All of us have had keys placed in our hands by God. You were ordained at your baptism. And I always said, this is actually one of the things that we should give. After a baptism, not only a candle, but a key. A key to the kingdom of heaven. To show opportunity and responsibility. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to be having a ministry fair. We have not had a ministry fair here in the last 3 years, and that was done on purpose because when I first got here, people were like, oh yeah, we have to have another fair, as if it was a big chore. And when I feel that ministry becomes a chore, it needs to go away for a while because all ministry needs to have is joy. We need the Holy Spirit to flow. And so now is time for a ministry fair unlike we've ever had. And we're going to have this great fair. In other words, there's going to be tents, there's going to be food, there are going to be games, not just for kids, for adults too. There we're going to have a great time. There will be music, karaoke, bounce house, all of this fun stuff together so that we can celebrate all that we have achieved in the last several years, as well as celebrate the things that we're going to do. But also what's nice about it is we will have tables of ministries. In other words, keys that'll be sitting around. I want you to really think about it. I want you to go to these tables. Why? Because I want you to see the different opportunities that are happening at Holy Trinity. There may be some ministries you didn't even know about. There may be ministries that you've always had a question about. It doesn't mean you have to join. It just means go ask and see. There's no pressure to it. But instead, I want us to have fun. Why? Because I want you to belong to something. I want you to be part of the church. I want you to be part of ministry. I want you to learn, and I want you to give of yourself. Over the next 2 weeks, I really want you to think about this, and I want you to pray about it. I want you to ask Christ, what is He calling you to do? Is it something big, or is it something small? Because quite frankly, in ministry, there is no measurement. It's all ministry. Remember that first car? Do you remember that first house? Well, the keys to ministry are much bigger. They're more powerful and they're more important. Like my great-grandmother's keys that are on the wall. It became something bigger than herself. Little did she know that those keys that were in her hand one day would cause a little girl to become an adult and have memories of her. For her to tell her children and her grandchildren the stories. It's the same with ministry. What keys will we leave on the wall? What will you do to continue Holy Trinity by the Lake for another generation, or 2, or 3? They may not know your name, but that's okay. That's not what it's about. But they will remember your ministry. Just like we remember the people 100 years ago that did this for us and left their keys so that we can talk about it. What is it that you're prepared to do? Always remember it starts with a first simple step. And always remember it's the resurrection of Jesus Christ that makes all of this possible. And isn't that the key? Amen.